So I guess I just need to preface this that I'm not the big, bad, ugly workout officer. I am trying to resolve the situation and try to come to an amicable resolution. So I think the issue that we're all facing right now is making this timely. Is that we're 90 days into the COVID situation. We've got no sales for the last 90 days, minimal collections. You've got your trade vendors knocking at the door. You're in the midst of dealing with your employees, or you furloughed them. You're busy with applying for triple P loans and EIDL loans, et cetera, et cetera. Yet liquidity is really the critical issue. And Bruce, Brian, what are you doing? What's going on?
So, Rob, I'm glad you called, and I wanted to have the CEO and the CFO call you first because two things. One is, as you know, we've entrusted them with the operational and financial oversight of the business, and the second thing I want you to know is that we support them fully. Our belief in these guys being able to run the company and steer through these rocky shoals is still very high. Obviously, the overall financial health falls on our shoulders, and so I was going to follow up so that you know that two things. One is we are all over this. I've asked the CEO and the CFO to run multiple scenarios and to start together with my team coming up with additional levers that we can pull. And so this call today is important, not only so that we can assess where we are, but together figure out whatever levers that we can pull. The other overarching comment I'd like to make to you is that in addition to believing in the management, we ultimately believe in this company. We have run into an unusual set of circumstances, some of which admittedly were on our doing, some of which are this systemic meltdown no one foresaw or have ever lived through this thing. But again, we're still standing with you and the company, and I think we'll be able to see our way through the end of it. So how did we get here? Plain and simple, as you know, through the years of this business, there is some seasonality to it, and we started to build to that season. And in doing that, we started to use cash to buy inventory in anticipation of being able to build our stuff for the coming season. What that did was reduce our cash and increase our inventory, which is typical for us. It also, as it relates to the borrowing base, gives us less availability because the cash is turned to inventory. We get lower advances on that inventory, and we haven't yet been able to turn that into accounts receivable. So the numbers are down. And then, as we all know, sales took a hit with the COVID so that the cash wasn't getting replenished as fast. And we sat there with an unusual, maybe call it seasonal, but stress seasonal borrowing base. And while the sales went away, the good news, as you know, Rob, from this company is that it is not just a one-time sale. So I think that we've got a timing delay and that our customers, at least in the checks that we have, themselves are still in business. Yes, slower, and yes, they may pay a little bit slower, but we believe whenever this downward fall corrects itself, they'll be strong, we'll be strong, and we'll be able to stand on our borrowing base certificates that we had in the past.
I guess so. So from what I'm hearing is it sounds like the predetermined formulas that we've got of 90 days eligibility for receivables and perhaps a 50% advance rate on inventory, you're going to need additional time and liquidity from that borrowing base. And I guess the only way we're going to need to really understand that is to have you, along with financial advisors and turnaround specialists help us see through this through a 13-week cash flow to understand what your assumptions are as to when you think your sales are going to start to turn around, when your inventory is going to start to sell, and just as importantly, when do you think your customers are going to be able to pay? So perhaps that's extending eligibility from 90-day eligibility on your receivables to perhaps 120, maybe even 150 days, and maybe on your inventory, we might have to what we call an over advance facility, which we will have to price accordingly and increase since we have increased risk, we would expect to be paid a higher rate of return for that, but at least that it would allow the company to stay in business and work its way through this COVID situation. One other aspect to preserve cash, obviously, if you're not shipping, if your locations are closed, I would assume that you've looked at furloughing employees, taking advantage of PPP funds, and doing whatever you can to preserve cash.
Yes, we have. And, having worked with you for a while, I assumed that you would look for that 13-week cash flow. So I've asked the CFO to start working on that, started really from the bottom up. To your point, we have far greater control over the expenses. In as difficult as it is to furlough people and cut salaries, cut our management fees, we are taking down what would be everything. We're getting down to the bone and getting through the muscle as fast as possible. The wild card, obviously, are the sales. I'm glad that you have offered up some of these ideas because as it was always contemplated, there was the ability to have an over advance for seasonal reasons. While I get this is not just a seasonal issue, it's not completely out of whack under our agreements to be able to do that. But we will come to you not only with a 13-week cash flow, but we'll look at various scenarios on the revenue side and the timing. Then that will show us what the shortfall might otherwise be. And obviously, cash is king. We know that we're going to husband our cash, and we're going to accelerate whatever else we can to generate cash into our coffers, i.e. your bank.
Great. I think the most important thing from our perspective is we know we're all in, we've heard the word 100 times, uncharted waters, unprecedented situations. But what we as a senior lender look for our clients to take control of is that which they can control: expenses, overhead, and trying to accelerate collections as much as you can, and putting off vendor payments as long as you possibly can. And that would clearly, the 13-week cash flow really is that roadmap that both sides, both lender and borrower, can evaluate, monitor, and tweak as the circumstances change and the pandemic continues, whether we're going to see improvement in your operations or further extension of delay. This 13-week cash flow really is that critical roadmap that we all need to follow.
And cut. With that, I want to cut. I want to point out to the audience something Rob, the banker, just said. It sounded all right, maybe in the first instance, certainly to him. But the part of me, as the lawyer who represents debtors, troubled companies, he talked about, well, maybe you could stretch the trade, right? And so there's a tension because the company, its owners, its board has duties to not just the senior secured, but to other creditors. It's got to consider what other creditors like trade vendors may do.